Hey guys, welcome back everybody. Today we're going to talk about how to configure the IP address on the IOS XR router. So if you see, this is the topology we have right now, router 1 and router 2, and router 1 should be have a IP address will be 12.1, and router 2 should be have IP address will be 10.1.12.2, right? And also, of course, I'm going to also create the one loop back to see how to configure the loop back on the iOS XR router. So if you're gonna compare with the normal iOS, right, that you use to configure the IP address on the normal iOS router, how do you do that? We just need to go on the interface label, interface 0/0, and say the keyword IP, right? And then you say the address. So IP itself is gonna represent that you're gonna configure the IPv4, and simply gonna put the command IP address 101 and /8. That's how simply you're gonna configure the IP address and this with the no shutdown command. So once you put this IP address, then what happened? Immediately this configuration will be part of the running config. And you can use this configuration on the router side. Even it means that you can make a ping to this IP address. Once you're gonna put the command WR, or you can set a copy running config to the startup config, then the configuration will be saved on the router side. This is how you do that on the normal iOS. But on the XR, it's totally different. On the XR, what happened? You have to configure the IP address. Once you configure the IP address, that configuration will be not directly applied to the router. So you need to put the extra step over here. So there's a configuration has categorized in the two parts. So one is called the first stage configuration, right? And second is called second stage configuration. In the first stage configuration, what happened? You simply configure the IP address on the router side. How do you do that? You need to go under the interface label, interface gig 0 by 0 by 0 by 0, right? And simply gonna configure the keyword is the IPv4. Now the question is that can't I use the IP keyword? Definitely you can use the IP keyword. But if you're gonna use the IP keyword, then if you're gonna put the question mark, the help will be not come. So better to use the IPv4 keyword. That's production is also using, and then you can simply give the command IP address and the 10.1.12.1. And instead of defining the /24 like this way, right, you do have a ability, right? You do have ability, you can simply define the /24. And now the finally we can put the no shutdown command, right? So once you put this configuration, then what happens? This is called the first stage configuration. By putting this configuration will be not a part of the router. It means that you cannot make a ping, right? Let's example from the router number 2, I have configured the IP address. I cannot ping this guy. The reason is that this configuration has not been saved on the router side. This configuration is present on the router, but it is not saved. So in the second stage, what happened? We need to commit this configuration. So once you commit this configuration, then what happened? The configuration will be saved on the router side. Let's have a look. So what we can do that? Let me take a console access of the router number 1. And I'll increase the font size, advanced appearance, 12 is fine. And okay, right. I'll give the username as Cisco1 is my password, Cisco1 is my password. And same thing, it's not number 2 as well. Log's username, Cisco1 is my password, Cisco1 is my password. That's good, right? So on the ISXR1, if you see, I'm gonna log into this particular device. I have a show IP interface belief right now. You can see that these are my interface of present on the router side, and I have one separate management interface as well, right? You can also use the keyword show IPv4 interface brief, right? This is also a command that's going to help you to check the same configuration. So either you can use the show IP interface brief or the show IPv4 interface brief. If you see one thing, I have a interface gig 0/0/0/0. I want to keep the keyword, right? So if I want to say the IP right now and put the question mark, I do not get any help from the Cisco side. It doesn't mean that you cannot use it. You do use it. So let's say example, I'm going to configure over here IPv4 address. And now if I want to put the question mark, they will ask you, right? Hey, what option you would like to go for? So that's the address. Now I need to configure it. Address and the 10.1.12.1. I do have an option. I can directly define the complete subnet, or I can define the CIDR value, right? So instead of defining the complete subnet mask, I'm going to define the CIDR value /24. Now, this configuration will be not a part of the interface right now. So if you see the show IP interface brief, right, or show IPv4 interface brief, right? We do show IPv4 interface brief. You can see that this configuration, right, that I have applied over here, it's not a part of the interface right now. The reason, this is the first stage configuration. In the first stage configuration, what happened? Your configuration will be present on the router side, right? But this configuration is not applied on the router. So what you can do that, you need to put the commit statement, right? Oh, I haven't put the notes down. You need to put the commit statement. Once I commit this guy, right? Commit is a, fancy way to save the configuration if you come from the iOS background, right? So now you can see that my configuration has been applied. So use the same command, do so IPv4 interface brief, and you can see that my interface has been configured. Let's do the same thing on the IOS XR2 right now. Log username, Cisco one is my password. What I can do that over here, I'll see the interface 0/0/0/0/0 right now. And instead of using the IPv4 keyword, I just want to show you that you do ability, right? You can configure with the IP keyword as well. 2 and I can define the, old school. No shutdown. This configuration is not a part of the anymore as a interface configuration right now. The reason is that this configuration has not been saved yet. So if you see the show running it's configuration right now, this configuration is there on the router, but it is not saved. How we can do that? I see the commit over here. So once I put the commit, now what happened? Do show IP interface brief. My configuration has been saved. Same way I can create the loop back as well. I'd say the exit from here, interface loop back, right? Same number you are getting like iOS, and as the IP address will be, or maybe use the IPv4 address. 2.2.2.2/2, and hey, oh, come on. Submit this guy. So now I have a show IP interface brief. I have a one loopback and one the physical interface. Quickly recap you what we have done. So on the router number one, what I done, I interface 0/0/0/0/0. I say the IPv4 address, right? 10.112.1/24. This way I have configured on the router number one. On the router number two, what I did that, in the router number two, I configured the IP address like this way. And interface loopback one, I have configured this way. Class 2. So both options you have, of course, once you have done with the configuration, you need to commit this guy. Commit is a way to save the configuration. So this is called the first stage configuration, and this is called the second stage configuration. Now if you're gonna make a ping pong, so from the router number two, if I'm gonna make a ping to the 12.1, I should be able to do that. Okay. So this is how you can configure the IP address on the IOS XR site. In the next video, we'll talk further more. Thank you.